Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Tower of London tea, which is one of my favorite flavored teas from Harney and Sons. I got my Shakespeare mug today. I'm not really going to be talking about Shakespeare, but I don't know. I thought Tower of London, Shakespeare seemed to work together. Yeah. Uh, this is just well, I like the tea as it is, but I was also thinking about what I heard in the news, which is not the biggest news item this month, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. I heard that one of the ravens, Merlina, I think it was, Merlina, I don't know how to say the names, went missing, and I don't think they found her, but I think she was presumed dead, last I heard. And I'd read The Raven Master last year about all the ravens that live in at the Tower of London, and what it takes to keep them there and keep them raised, and what their lives are like and what it's like to work at the Tower of London. It was a really good, enjoyable book, which I still recommend. But just thought that was kind of sad once you get to know uh, an animal, even when you never meet them in person. Like these internet cats, stuff like that. You do sometimes get a little attached. I don't know. But yeah, so that was just my little acknowledgement and an excuse to drink Tower of London tea. So I thought I'd do a little mid-month wrap up because I've read quite a lot of books this month. I read one mystery already, and I won't really talk about that because, gotta save that for tea and mystery. But so I think that I finished already 5 books this month, and 3 of them are from Helene Hanff. So one of them was in my TBR already for this month, but I have to remember myself, and I'm not someone who can just read 84 Charing Cross Road and stop there. I mean, never say never, but in the winter when I have time off, I suddenly get a little bit dug in, I guess you could say. So I won't talk too much about 84 Charing Cross Road because I'm sure there's plenty of people who've been reading it on BookTube recently because it was a whole thing about reading it on New Year's, and I thought that was a great idea. What a great way to start a year, honestly. There's one letter that she did actually on a New Year's. I think it was for 1960. This is how long ago this was. This is a collection of correspondence from 1949 to 1969, I guess, and it was published around 1970. And this is a woman who worked in show business. In fact, I got recently her Underfoot in Show Business, which was a memoir she wrote in the 60s, which I'd read years ago, but I couldn't find at the library. So I thought I'd get a copy for myself. And she worked she wanted to be a writer for plays, stuff like that, and television, I guess. But it was really hard. But she also loved reading, especially English literature of a certain kind, especially nonfiction. And she just found a way of doing so by corresponding with a bookshop in London. She explains in other books and stuff how she could have actually bought books elsewhere sometimes, but that she just really enjoyed getting them from this bookshop, and they were helpful too, finding stuff that she otherwise couldn't have found. So anyway, and it's just a beautiful story, and I totally always recommend you read this if you have not read this. It is not a big commitment. You can see it's not a big book. This one got a little messed up, but it's not very big, and I would say 95% I would say of the people who I recommend this to love it. And the rest just don't really like to read. So that was one book I read on New Year's. And I will get back to Helene Hanff in a minute. But after that, I'm still on Helene Hanff, but after that I watched right away. I watched the film 84 Charing Cross Road, which is similar to the book where it needs to be, and a few changes were made for storytelling purposes, for filming purposes, and I thought that was fine. The only thing that I wish would have been put in, there was in the movie there are 2 characters who Helene meets, a couple, and they're dating and they're about to get married, and you see them as they get married, as they have kids, and she babysits their kids. So it's like a friendship between Helene and this couple and their kids and dogs, whatever. And that's fine. It's just a little bit in the story. And then, but in the actual book, there is a postcard of this couple when they actually went to London, and they went to the bookshop, and everybody found out who they, who they knew. They knew Helene, and how everybody just came out and, wanted to see them and take care of them, and including the bookshop owner. It's just a great moment that I can see why they probably didn't want to do it, because it might have taken, they actually filmed the movie in two locations, in New York and London. I mean, there could have been more, but that's what I know. So the New York cast mostly stayed in New York, and the London cast mostly stayed in London, with, I think, two exceptions. And it might have been costly, maybe, to fly them over. I don't know the deal. Maybe they just decided to leave it out. It wasn't a big deal, but I would have liked to have seen that scene. Otherwise, yeah, great movie. Very comforting. Sad in moments, but comforting and funny in many, and very bookish, just like the book. So I did that, and then, I watched a few episodes of Odd Couple, because they had an Odd Couple marathon, the one from the 70s, which is one of my favorite shows. So I was kind of in old-time New York mode, as it was. And then I decided, let me pick up one other book, and I ended up reading it for the rest of the day. I finished it shortly after midnight, and, so this is the only non-mystery, non-Helene Hanff book that I finished. It was a short read, so it wasn't that hard to finish, but Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel, which was translated, which I've been trying to read more translated books this year, not like as a massive must-do goal, but as a, this would be nice. And I am reading another book right now that's translated, Crime and Punishment. So I'm on the right track when it comes to that. I'm doing well, and I'm making good progress in Crime and Punishment. I have help because I'm reading it with a group, but this book, while it was well written, now, okay, so I have this book because I used to go to a writing workshop, and I enjoyed that. I don't know if I'll do that again, but at the time it was really helpful. It helped me kind of be able to share what I was writing with other people, which is something I've always had trouble doing, just out of, shyness. It's kind of hard to show your work, but it's still kind of hot. The teacher, I don't know what you call the person who runs the group, used to bring samples of different styles of writing and everything to talk about, and she brought part of Like Water for Chocolate, and it was just an interesting excerpt. So we were talking about it enough that the next time we had a workshop, she showed up and brought this for me, because she said she had an extra copy. So I thought, that was a couple of years ago, and I kept telling myself, let me read this, and I just put it off because just was never in the mood for it, and I read it. And the writing is very well done. I know it's translated, but I'm assuming it's translated faithfully from the writer. But it's really not kind of my thing. It's, what do they call it? Magical realism or magic realism? Magical realism? That sounds about right. That I've encountered in other books too. Usually in lighter bits here and there. But this kind of was a little much for me. I don't know the exact definition. I looked it up, but it kind of makes like things that couldn't happen in real life happen in a way that people encounter it and don't question it, and yet it's not a fantasy novel either, where actual fantasy beings exist for real and people are encountering them. I don't know. So the premise of the story is that the narrator is telling a story about her aunt from a cookbook of the aunts. So the whole story, it says it's in monthly installments, which has nothing really to do with the story. It's just broken up in 12 parts. It doesn't cover a month. It can cover a year. It could cover a number of years. So I don't know why that was done, but maybe people like to read things in installments. Okay. And the recipes are kind of told within each story, within each month of narrative. So, so it's not like just, okay, here are the ingredients and here's how it's made. It starts with the ingredients and then it tells the story while it gives instructions of what to do with the food as it goes on, which is kind of interesting. I couldn't really follow it because I'm not much of a cook, but I've heard people have tried it before. The basic premise of the story is, I don't know the exact years. They mentioned some characters. I probably could have looked it up, but it seems the early 1900s in Mexico. There's this family, and they're not, I don't think rich, but they're okay. They're well off enough, it seems, but there's a little bit of political unrest that affects the story. But mainly, what's her name? Tita, I think her name is. It's been a while since I read this book. Yeah. Um, the aunt who is the main character in the story. She's the youngest of three girls, and the mother is widowed, and the mother basically runs the house. And um, Tita's really good in the kitchen. She's really good at cooking, and apparently she cried so much at one point, was it when she was born or whatever it was, that there was enough salt to feed the family for ages, which is part of the storytelling. Which when I read that, I was kind of like, okay, but fine. Um, she when she's a little bit older, she and a guy, boy, I don't remember his age, they fall in love, and he asks for her hand in marriage, the mother, and the mother says no. We have a family tradition in which the youngest does not get married. The youngest stays home with the parents and takes care of them, which makes no sense. He's even explored a little bit how is that logical? What happens to the youngest when she's older? Who takes care of her? So she's like, okay, you can't marry my daughter, but you can marry my other daughter, the middle child, I think. And that's kind of what happens in the story. And I don't want to get too much into everything else that happens, but it makes for a very uncomfortable story, to me anyway. And I wasn't, it, there was a lot of, a lot of exaggerated things that happened, a lot of sensuality, which doesn't really float my boat too much. I don't mind books about food, although I can get hungry, but I just thought it was too much about the food and the passion and all this stuff. And then the way the mother treats her daughter is absolutely horrible, hard to read. And then there's some people in the story who are really quite, I mean, not perfect, but quite nice that you kind of root for. That it's like, I just don't understand why she doesn't, why she would have any feelings for this other guy when he agrees to marry her sister. It Some people thought, I think I was reading reviews, some people think it was like a really romantic story. It wasn't my kind of romantic story. I'm not that romantic as it is, but it wasn't really for me. There was a part where she was feeling particularly amorous with what she was cooking with, and that it makes everybody else feel amorous, and it was almost funny, but I was like, oh. And then there was a part where these chickens suddenly went a little nuts and surrounding, and they caused like a sort of like a little mini tornado that they were all caught up with, and I was like, I can't deal with this. I don't know. I'm not saying I haven't read anything that has some elements of this in the story, but it was too much. Like, for instance, when I read Jane Eyre, which I quite liked, there was a scene where one person calls out for another person, and that person many miles away, or whatever distance they were, kind of hears it. And I didn't like that either, but it was not happening constantly, that sort of thing. So this was just, I don't know, I kept disagreeing with things that happened, people's choices, everything that was going on. And yes, I still say it was beautifully written. And if you like magical realism, then you will like this story. But it just didn't do it for me. And so enough said. But it was a quick read anyway. So if that's your kind of genre and you want a quick read, then there you go. Now we shall return to Helene Hanff, who tends to be more realistic. I read people that said that she may have exaggerated certain parts of her own story, and I'm like, well, when you're writing memoirs, first of all, if you're recounting dialogue, you're probably not remembering word for word what people say. So, I mean, unless you have that kind of memory, most people don't. So, if I decided to write a story about a trip that I took or whatever, and I wanted to make it as, good a story as possible, I'm sure I would have parts of it that I was just, did this happen, or am I remembering this right? And maybe just put in a few things that would not be exactly perfect in detail, or accurate. But I don't think she completely changed things that happened, because when she published these things, people were still alive mostly to have corrected her if she had done something that was really off. Anyway, that's just a side point that I don't know why I mention it, but right after I read 84 Charing Cross Road, I read what was basically the sequel. I reread. These are all rereads. all the Helene Hanffs anyway. The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, which is basically her, kind of like a diary of her trip to London for the first time. And of course, I always liked that. Last year, I enjoyed it more in terms of expectation because, well, broken record, I had a trip planned. And it hadn't been canceled yet early in the year. So it's kind of nice to read stuff and say, oh, maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll go there or whatever. But this time, actually, I was okay. I wasn't like, oh, if only. I enjoyed it. I can't believe the things that I forget within a year's time. So sometimes rereads can be good. Yeah, it's great. It's there are so many interesting people that she meets up with. And what I like about her is that she loves books, she loves to read, she definitely enjoys England quite a lot. But just like everybody's different. I always think when I go away, I like to go into bookshops. That's not really her thing. So it's like people will surprise you. You think, can you imagine if some if you had to arrange a trip in London or anywhere, you know, say your hometown, say someone like Helene Hanff was visiting and you had read 84 Charing Cross Road, you'd probably want to take them to bookshops, right? But that's not really her thing. So yeah, surprising. But anyway, I've talked about this book before on this channel. So now the other book I read of hers that I read this week was a reread, and I think I talked about it when I did a video about all of Helene Hanff's books that I had on hand. And I think I might have been mistaken in this book. If I talked, I don't remember what kind of depth I went into about this book. But Apple of My Eye, which is about New York. I think kind of obviously you could see the, oh, my nail, sorry. My nails are not doing well now, so every time I see them I go a little. Anyway, this book is actually falling apart a little, but I might want to try to find another more put together copy. But that's okay. For now, it's still readable. But I mixed it up with another book called Letter from New York, which I actually just put on order because I finally found it. I haven't been able to find it online for a long time or at the library. So I do want to read that one too because it's the things, traffic. It's the things that I thought were in this book that weren't, just like different anecdotes of her life living in New York. This isn't really that. This is supposed to be like a tourist guide, but it ended up being more of a memoir of Helene and her friend Patsy, who spend like spring-ish / I think summer-ish time in doing just touristy things all over Manhattan. Basically Manhattan, not really the other boroughs. A very brief visit to Roosevelt Island, which is technically Manhattan anyway. I think I mentioned that recently. In 1976, which is a year that I am both very familiar with and very unfamiliar with. And I kind of liked it because it was going into a time where New York was considered past it. It was broke. You know, there were all kinds of things about what President Ford had said to the city and how New York just didn't have money to do any of the repairs, any of the improvements that they needed. And crime was bad, and yeah, just get out of New York while you can, kind of thing. Remind you of something? So I think that I liked that because, I mean, you know, it is kind of that broken record feeling. I felt that around 9/11 too, and I felt that during other gentrification, different financial times. I'm not trying to overly defend New York City. It's my, you know, it's the city where I live. It's, you know, I do care for it in its own way. It's not like a pride thing because I just happen to have been born in the city. I don't, you know, but yeah, but I do get, like, I understand that this year, well, it's been tough for everybody, every place, but I didn't like the constant, oh, you know, glad I got out while I still can kind of feeling. Because, like, you know, for those of us who stay behind, that can be very discouraging. But this book, she basically, with her friend, goes all over, uptown, downtown, down to Trinity Church, where she sees the grave of Alexander Hamilton and other people, and there's a whole story behind what happens there too, and Wall Street and the newly opened World Trade Center, which was interesting because at this point in my life, you couldn't catch me going on top of a building anymore because of what happened to the World Trade Center. But this was so new at this time, and you know, they're both afraid of heights, and yet they brave it. They go all the way uptown to the Cloisters. They go to Harlem. They go to Midtown, all over the Theater District, Upper West Side, Upper East Side. I read up a little bit, and someone had mentioned in a blog or something that her friend lived in the Upper West Side as opposed to where Helene lives, which is the Upper East Side. But her friend lived, it seems, in the Beresford, I don't know how to pronounce that, building, which I had read a lot about in, what was that book called? Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. I'm not good with names, but Amor Towles, anyway, which was about New York City, like in the late 30s, I think, and that building is mentioned quite a lot. And I passed by it back in, I think, September, when I took a walk through the park and came out over there. So it's kind of fun if that is indeed true, and it sounds like it when they describe where she lives. It sounds very much like that's where it was. I really want to visit that place one day. I don't know how I would, because it's very expensive. Probably has good security, but anyway, but it would be fun if I knew someone to visit there. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not like going in by myself. Anyway, I did go into Helene Hanff's building once. I don't remember if I was with my friend or not, because it's been so long. I feel like my friend was there, but I didn't go into her, all the way into her building, just like the hallway, vestibule, whatever you call it. And they have a little bit of a display of Helene Hanff's pictures, stuff like that. Maybe newspaper clippings. It's been so long. I'm not even sure if I took any pictures. Just to kind of, a little tribute to her. They renamed the actual apartment that she lived in, the actual building, Charing Cross House, which was nice. So if you're ever over by 72nd and 2nd, yeah, stop by. Maybe they'll let you walk in and tell you something. Because the doorman at the time, it's been over a decade, the doorman at the time knew her apparently and told me some things. So that was nice. Who knows? He could have exaggerated too. But I really liked this because there's a lot that's changed in New York since this time, but then there's a lot of things that are still kind of the same. I mean, sort of. And then this book was republished in 1988 with some postscripts, more recent things that happened, more recent buildings and places that had changed. Central Park had changed a little bit. She loves Central Park so much and really hates that the Metropolitan Museum of Art was extending into it. I'm the other way around. I love Central Park very much, but I like the museum so much too that I don't mind. We're all a little bit different, but if you love reading about New York, then this is a good book for you. What I would love to do, not right now, because it would be kind of hard to do with everything happening now, but I would love to revisit all the places in this book, even though I've been to some of them quite recently, and just see, note what has changed, I mean, some are very obvious that have changed and some are not. So that would be kind of cool. Yeah. I haven't been to the Cloisters where she goes since the 80s. I mean, I've been outside of it, but still. So there's a lot of things I could do. Anyway, that's a lot of chit chat about Helene Hanff once again, but why not? I have more books going, so hopefully I will be able to finish. I am the queen of having way too many books going at once. I try not to have too many of the same genre at once. Like if I'm reading a murder mystery, I try to only read one at a time because it might get confusing. But a lot of traffic going on outside. That's kind of nice. People are out and about a little bit. Anyway, so I ends up making my finishing books a little more extended, but then I ended up sometimes finishing a bunch of books at once, and then I have a lot of books, but it's not about the numbers, is it? So anyway, let me know what you've been reading so far, and I will give you more updates as the month goes on. And if you like talking about any of the books that we talked about today, as well as the books I'm currently reading, Russian classics, Anthony Trollope, etc., please feel free to subscribe, comment, all the things. So this is Catherine taking tea with Catherine. Shakespeare's staring at you kind of creepily. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day. Goodbye.